Today we bake on Weekend at the Cottage. We are baking a cake, an unusual cake. We're doing a parsnip cake. Hats off to my sister Dana and my cousin Linda. I sent out an email to family members and said, I need a killer recipe for a carrot cake. Linda came back with a recipe for a carrot cake from a book she received from our mutual Aunt Alexandra. Recipes seemed pretty good. And my sister Dana sent back a recipe. At the bottom of Dana's recipe it said, can also be made with parsnips, which started this whole circle of ideas into my mind. We have played around with this recipe until we nailed it. And now I'm going to show you how to make a very unusual but really wonderfully flavored cake using parsnip. Before we start the recipe, a couple of things. The recipe does contain nuts, so if you have a nut allergy, keep watching because maybe you're going to send the recipe to someone who doesn't. I'm using half a cup of walnuts, half a cup of pecans, and half a cup of pumpkin seeds, a bit unusual. Into a food processor, I pulse for a bit until they're finely chopped. Take the nuts and put them to the side. Now on to our principal ingredient, which is parsnip. I love this flavorful, unusually flavored vegetable. We peel our parsnips, trim off the edges. I'm also going to save a 4-inch piece of parsnip, but put that to the side. Right now we're adding kind of a fine grater attachment to our food processor. It goes into place, cap goes on, and we start the machine running, and then we're dropping 2 parsnip into the food processor. You can see this is a pretty fine grate, which is what I want in the recipe. We're also adding a fruit complement, 2 pears. We're adding a pair of pears into the recipe. They're peeled, I cored them. Same time with the parsnip, they're mixed together. Take those 2 ingredients, we're pouring them into a bowl, then we're taking a hand grater and we have about 1 inch of ginger. So I want you to grate the ginger very fine. All of that is in the bowl. You can toss them together to set the vegetables to the side. Now remember that little bit of parsnip, take it on a cutting board, slice it into rounds, then quarter it onto a parchment-lined baking sheet, a little bit of vegetable oil, a little bit of sugar. We're going to be putting this in the oven when we go to bake our cake. Before we prepare the cake, we have a 9x13 baking pan. I'm going to butter it, we're going to flour it, set it to the side. Now we're ready to move on to our dry ingredients. Place a fine sieve on top of the bowl before we add our dry ingredients. I'm adding 2 cups of unbleached flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, and now a wonderful blend of spices. We have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon ground coriander, half a teaspoon of ground cardamom, and half a teaspoon of ground ginger. Now as we stir those dry ingredients, they're going to go through the sifter and you're going to get a sense of the wonderful fragrance that this cake will have. Dry ingredients are done, we set them to the side. Now we have an additional bowl. I have 2 cups of granulated sugar, and now it's time for oil. We have 3/4 of a cup of a canola oil, and also 3/4 of a cup of walnut oil. This is a bit of a magic ingredient. It gives a wonderful flavor to this cake. Now we're going to take our hand mixer, beat the oil and sugar till it's light and fluffy. We have 4 eggs at room temperature, add them 1 at a time. Notice how I'm pouring them from small little measure cups. Never break an egg over a bowl because if you ever get a shell in there, you may have a tough time getting them out. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, toss in our chopped nuts, add in the parsnip, pear, and ginger, and make sure you stir everything thoroughly. I want to make sure the parsnip, pear, and ginger is well mixed throughout the entire cake. Now we take our bowl, transfer the batter into the cake pan, smooth out the top. Our oven is preheating to 350 degrees. Rack is in the middle position and lower position. The cake goes in the middle position, and then remember those little parsnip bits. They're going into the bottom rack of the oven. The cake will bake for exactly 1 hour on the dot. The little parsnip bits you can take out at 20 minutes. Now that the cake is in the oven, we're going to go on and make a beautiful icing for the cake. Into a bowl, I have 1 package of cream cheese, room temperature, 1 stick of butter, room temperature, hand mixer. I'm going to whip these ingredients until they're light and fluffy. Next we add 3 cups of icing sugar. I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. The addition of the lemon juice gives it a zingy flavor. Finally, 2 spice components, half a teaspoon of ground ginger, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Now the color of the icing has changed. Now that the icing is ready, cake is still baking, but I want to show you a quick trick on how to put icing into a pastry bag. Take your pastry bag, trim off the end, and then you need to select a nib. I like a 4B star shape. I place it into the bottom of the pastry bag, and then a tall glass. Place the pastry bag in, turn down the sides. Now that the pastry bag is standing in the glass, it's easy to take a bowl in one hand, a spatula in the other, and slowly dollop in the icing. Especially if you're working alone. If you've got someone else in the kitchen, they can always hold the bag for you, but I think this trick really works well. I lift up more of the bag, fill it all the way to the top with the icing, kind of bring the icing down, turn the edges in, and then do a little squeeze to make sure your icing is in perfect form. Set that to the side. Now that the cake is done, I stuck a cake tester in, it certainly is done. We take it out and we're going to allow it to cool for 5 minutes before we invert it onto a wire rack. After that, we need to allow the cake to cool completely. If you're serving this for a party or a special occasion, make your cake in the morning, let it cool nicely before you continue and decorate it. I love when unusual things happen in the kitchen. I went to take the cake out of the pan, a little bit stuck to the bottom, which is like, oh, didn't put enough butter and flour on there. So now I have to invert the cake. When I inverted the cake, I had taken it off of this wire rack, which has this crosshatch pattern, and now when I invert it, I was like, wow, this is actually quite nice. I'm kind of liking this pattern, right? It allows me to follow exactly how to cut our slab cake into 12 perfect shaped pieces. Let's say that you have your little pieces, we'll place them on a plate. We're gonna take a small sieve, a little bit of icing sugar, tap, 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 and you have a beautiful dusting on a piece of cake, a little bit on the plate as well. And you have a really simple way of presenting this cake, send it out for an afternoon snack people will enjoy. Let's say, presentation option number 2, we take a second piece of cake, same thing. We're gonna tap, tap, tap it with icing sugar, but now we take the piping bag and we're gonna pipe a beautiful rosette of our very flavorful icing on top. Remember those parsnip bits? Stick one in there, and then if you can, try to find these very flavorful rounds of sugared ginger slices. Cut into the slice, divide it into 4, and now we have a piece of parsnip on the top of the cake, a piece of the ginger, grab a little bit of cinnamon, and dust the top. The final presentation option for you to enjoy is to take the pieces of cake and divide them into 4 so you have smaller bites. I think this is a really great presentation if you're going to serve this, let's say, for a dessert buffet late at night. These small bite-sized pieces are really nice in case you don't want to serve a full or heavy dessert. Well, 1, 2, 3 different presentation options, one fabulous, remarkably delicious cake. How do I know? Well, I've had a sample, and let me just tell you, honestly, parsnip, pear, the creaminess of this very flavorful icing. It has a wonderful spice component to it. I'm kind of thinking this is going to become my most favorite cake. I hope, let me stop. I hope you make this recipe and enjoy. Of course, we'd really love it if you head to Weekend at the Cottage and check out some of our other fabulous food and drink recipes. Tips on gardening, entertaining, everything and anything is there for you to enjoy. Remember to sign up for our newsletter when you're visiting our website. Then look for us on our YouTube channel. Make sure you click subscribe, click the button for notifications, thumbs up, lots of comments are always appreciated. And then finally, why not chat with the other person who enjoyed this cake, our wonderful Carol Bogazzi, who's manning the stations on our social media networks, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Other than that, whether you're serving this for a simple afternoon get-together or a special holiday celebration, parsnip cake should be on your next menu because you're going to get such amazing praise for this delicious cake. Wait until you try it. Hope you enjoy. Come on back and visit again soon. Take care. Fabulous, 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 fabulous.